Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
You are in the right place right here on Tuesday, April 16th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time in the gorgeous state of Colorado. And in fact, we're in Greater Colorado today with our guest, Thomas Frey. Now, before I introduce you to him, I just want to remind you that you're in the right place for conversations about needs that we as business owners have. The things that we face and we grapple with every day around technology changing so quickly, customers changing their expectations, and, even us deciding, are we on track for our growth strategy? Change, and change. So the Voice of Bold Business Radio is all about what it means to reach our short-term goals, as well as increase confidence in the long-term positioning of our businesses. This is program 216, The Future Now. And what we prioritize, what we think about, totally comes from what we think about. And so my suggestion and question for you, audience listening today, is to use hashtag VBB Radio and join in. Make sure Thomas gets your questions. Make sure that you're thinking and recognizing the opportunity to expand your awareness around different things here and there when it comes to your business, when it comes to your communities, when it comes to your home life. Because things as we know it today are very different than we know it from the year we were born, which is very different than take our age, the amount of time before we were born. And it's changing faster and faster and faster. And Thomas Frey is the senior futurist and founder of the DaVinci Institute. He speaks globally about the understanding of what we have today and what makes tomorrow possible. The futurist topics that he chooses to speak on and think about captivate his audiences. He has spoken with, worked with TEDx, Hewlett-Packard, Visa, Frito-Lay, KPMG, that list goes on and on and on. By the way, he writes a weekly column. And so one of the things that you can do is check out Futurist Speaker's blog. So that's futuristspeaker.com and click on blog. He writes an article there every week. He also sends out an email. And so we're going to make sure to have a link for you, not only to his book to purchase in our show notes, but also to be able to reach out and get signed up for his newsletter to stay creative, to think about what we're not thinking about once in a while. Thomas, I have to tell you, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. So this Tuesday, I'm surprised there's no snow today. I mean, it seems like we're getting snow every other day right now in our beautiful greater Denver area. Some people are going to be listening and they may never have heard the word futurist before. Or if they have, it's a concept that they're like, it doesn't relate to my daily life, my daily business, and what I do. And we're here to tell them that that's making them at a disadvantage. So what is a futurist and how did you decide that you wanted to be one?
Great question. I always think of my role as a futurist as helping expand people's understanding of what the future holds. I don't do things like weather forecasts. I don't pick lotto numbers. I don't do stock picks. Most of what I focus in on is technology-driven change, about how the technology is changing us. Now, there's lots of aspects of the future. I do get into shifting demographics quite a bit. But when it comes to things of government and politics and religion, I tend to stay out of that. Unless we into more of the macro topics, but it's mostly technology-driven change. And that is a rich topic area because technology is shifting so many things in our lives right now. It just virtually everything that's happening around us. I mean, almost every person I run into has this nagging anxiety. Am I still going to have a job 5 years from now? And if not, what new skills do I need to learn? And we all need to learn new skills. We need to be open and receptive and trying new things. So some of the most valuable skills in the future are going to be somebody who is resourceful or resilient, somebody who's flexible and determined. All of these things are skills and talents that are hard to teach. And so it's things happening outside of our existing education system.
Oh, you couldn't have said it better. That was where I was going next. And what do we need to do to help our kids and the young men and women that are currently at the end of high school, somewhere in their undergraduate degree? Because even in colleges, I'm not sure that they actually teach things like resourcefulness and determinedness and discernment.
Right. Those are really hard things to skill to pick up, especially in our super distracted society. I mean, we're so distracted, and so teaching somebody just how to focus. I mean, how to zoom in on one topic and pay attention to it, to drill down and to think deeply about it. Most of us get down to like surface level thinking, but very few of us actually drill down and really get into the deep understanding of how things work. And that's what becomes challenging. And so if we can kind of block out all of these things that are pulling us in different directions, I think we'll have better tools for doing that in the future. But right now, it's kind of a free-for-all out there.
It is. When it comes to understanding how to make an impact in a world filled with distractions and instant gratification. I mean, part of that is distraction because everything is pulling at us. And another part of it is instant gratification because we're experiencing it more and more every day. And so we've got one side where we're experiencing it as a consumer, as somebody in our communities, within our world society. Yet on the other side, there's this gap of how come we're not seeing what's being created for us when we're experiencing it? How come we can't create that instantaneously too? Now, when it comes to technology, do you see changes around that where technology is going to actually help us innovate faster, or are we still in this concept of, heart, head, thinking, experiencing, and it's going to always take time to create an output of instant gratification?
Our ability to create is to exceed our ability to absorb all the new technology. So I think we have certain barriers. I mean, I think we can only transition so quickly. Human nature has some barriers that we throw up if something is a little too soon, if we haven't gone through the life cycle of some older technology just yet. And the life cycles seem to be getting a little bit shorter, but there are some barriers that we just can't transition. We have to kind of muddle our way through it and figure out what's reasonable and what isn't. So as an example, you have a young child.
Yes, I do.
Parenting is becoming more challenging almost on a daily basis. So at what age do you buy your child their first smartphone? What's reasonable? How much screen time do you allow your child to have during a day? And people come up with different answers to this. And there's different studies coming out and everything. But the right answer is not always the right answer for you.
Right.
And then when it comes to having cell phones when you get into the teenage years, you have to start going into cell phone curfews and take your phones away from your kids before they go to bed, because there's lots of incidents where the kids are up texting each other all night long because there's some drama going on at school, and we're hearing more and more incidents of young people going to the emergency room from sheer exhaustion, that they've been up 3 or 4 or 5 days in a row, and their grades at school have just nosedived. They've just plummeted because this drama happening at school is far more interesting than anything they're teaching in the classroom. So, so how do you as a parent deal with that? And that becomes such a challenging topic.
And it's neat because there is no single right answer. There is not only what fits in a life, but what fits in a family. There's an element of convenience. I will tell you, sometimes the choices we make are all about convenience when it comes to our family.
Right.
And sometimes the choices we choose to take a much, much harder road, and we're very careful about those. And when we're thinking about basically what battles do we want to fight, right? What are our priorities for our family? And in the end, I'll tell you what, Thomas, we've got 3 values in our family. I have 3 personal values, but my husband and I together created 3 values for our family. And they're from a book called Conversations with God. We've decided we would just adopt those, which is awareness, responsibility, and honesty. And so everything that we do, we use that as a filter. Now, other people, right, will have other filters. And so I guess what I would say is underneath the question there, to build on what you were saying, is what is the filter with which we want to experience the world, and what do we want to leave behind to give our kids what they need to go out on their own and stay there?
Right. I'll give you another really good example. In the very near future, we're all going to have sensors built to our clothing, so that when we sit down and we eat a plate of food, we're pretty well going to understand what effect that plate of food will have on us before we eat it. We know how much we weigh before we eat a plate of food and how much we're going to weigh afterwards. We know if it gives us stomach problems and all that. And just because we know that information, is that going to change our diet? I mean, theoretically, we should all be living much healthier because we know what's going to happen. And so we select much better diets for us. But will we? I mean, I still think that people are going to smoke and drink, and they're going to overeat and love the comfort food and all that because it just tastes good. And it feels so. It
does just taste good. Hey, well, and we can even go into the past for that. I'm not sure if you remember this or not, but when McDonald's first started selling salads, their overall sales had a large increase, right? They had a large increase in revenue. And when they went back and they looked at what was being sold, the increase did not come from salads. The increase came from more hamburgers and French fries. I know, right? And yeah. So, and the mind is a crazy thing. Now, if we flip back to the future and we think about some of the things in that capacity, and these are just everyday questions of how we live, right? What food do we eat? What these sensors can tell us, it's time to, and we already have some, it's time to take a walk. It's time to, it's time to stand up if you've been sitting for a while. Whatever, here's how well you slept last night. So do this to help you maximize where you're at. Like I have a thing that does that. And there are days I laugh at it because it's like, walk 2 miles. I'm like, why? Well, so you want me to sit all day? I hear that. How interesting is it that my technology is telling me to sit all day? And it's directly related to all the sensory stuff that's going on, and it's trying to make predictions to help me out. And you were talking about the overload of technology. And I'm thinking about business now, right? Taking this concept of what you were just sharing of all of these sensors that we may have, the way that we get to interact with our world is going to continue to change, yet we can't adopt it fast enough. And so do you with all of the possibilities out there, do you have a suggestion or an approach that, people can take when they're talking about technology within their businesses? How quickly do you change? Do you adapt? Do you update technologies? And does it really, when is it necessary?
Yeah, some people are the early adopters and some people need to be early adopters. I tend to be a later adopter because I want the bugs worked out first before I try something out. Before I spend money on technology that might be a lot of garbage. I want to know that it's working good first. And so it depends on the personality, it depends on the business you're in, and so there's no kind of right or wrong answer to that. But I think your awareness of the technology needs to, you need to be constantly learning about what new things are coming down the pike. And that's challenging too, because people don't know what they should be paying attention to and what they can dismiss. A lot of things come and go, this flash in the pan, this thing that quickly dissolves, and it's like the new thing, and all of a sudden it's gone. Or Google's AI Council, which they've dissolved the second one now that there's too much fighting. So there's a lot of things. We have to do a lot of experimenting. We have to try things. We have to break things. We need to know what works and what doesn't, and that's okay. I mean, that's okay. That's the sign of a trailblazer. I mean, somebody who's willing to take those risks. And I'm constantly saying that the future favors the bold. The future is all being built around people who are making these bold moves, taking these bold choices. And I think that's important that we still do that. And those are our heroes. I mean, those are the people that we look up to because they turn left when everybody else is turning right. How do we know when to do that? How do we know when to take those risks? And so personally, I'd love to know that myself. But
Me too.
I've been a student of this all my life, and I'm still not sure I'm doing the right thing. So,
you've got to be doing something right. That's all I've got to say. And isn't that funny? Because I wonder that as well. That self-reflection. It seems important to recognize where we've come from and where we're at, so that we understand. It sounds like, if I were to reflect back to you, to understand where we come from in the future, we need where we came from and where we are now, and then to really have a sense of self. And that self could be personal. It could also be organizational, to recognize what to pick out and to attempt and to follow and to support.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the hype. There's a lot of early hype and a lot of new technology that's coming out, and people tell interesting stories about it. They they add this emotional component to it, which makes it feel like everything is right, but it might be totally wrong. And so it's really difficult to separate kind of the emotional part from it to make the ideal right choices. So that's an ongoing challenge that everybody's going to have in the future. It's just the choices we make are going to define us, but we don't know which ones are wrong. And
we can't choose them, and we can't choose them all.
No, we can't choose them all. Should we?
The times I get overwhelmed are sometimes it's when I say like yes to too much, but other times it's when I recognize there are just way too many choices and I have chosen too many things. And so I'm thinking back to something that you said about the skills that we need, in the future. And are we teaching those to our kids, or how will our kids learn that? I'm thinking about us as adults, right? Because even though we want our kids to have these skills to succeed, because the world is going to be different from where they are now to when they leave school, even if school has not adapted as quickly to support them. Right. And so I was looking at one of your articles, and you're talking about these 11 skills. And one of them you've already mentioned a little bit of, which is this distraction management. And so if we don't know how to do it, we can't teach those that we are role models for. And so to be our own line leader, we're talking about kids, so here we go. To be our own line leader, we have to take personal responsibility. So as whatever age we're at right now, recognizing this concept of distraction and needing to manage that, and that actually being a fundamental skill of being productive and actually getting results versus being spread too thin and not really seeing much of anything happen.
Right.
What are some of your key takeaways around that make up a good distraction management skill?
I always of distraction management as like the cone that goes around a dog's head. And I think kids in school with cones around their heads, that would just not a really good image. Cones around their head. But it's that type of focus that we need to take control of. So is there a way of creating a digital cone around their head that's not a physical cone? That might be possible. And see, whenever there's a problem, there's also an opportunity. So somebody is going to look at the opportunity side of the equation, and they're going to say, oh, a digital cone around their head, that might be possible. Maybe we can actually block out all the sounds. We can block out all the images, the flashing lights and everything, the bright shiny objects over here. We can kind of mute all that, and they can just focus on just this right in front of them. And for some kids, that might be the answer. That might be what changes them from a C and D student to an A and B student, and all of a sudden they're really doing well. They can dive in and tackle any project they want.
Focus. Hey, speaking of focus, we've got people listening, and they're like, hey, we want to ask questions of Thomas. All right, so here's a question from Jay using hashtag VBBRadio. What's the biggest mistake a high school student graduate can make today about their future?
I think the biggest mistake they make is going deeply in debt to get a college degree. I think there's other options right now. See, our vision of the future plays a huge role in the decisions we make today. And in the past, it never happened quite like this, but if you can imagine an 18, 19-year-old kid sitting down with somebody from a college, and the person from the college saying, hey, do you want to drive that fast car? Do you want to live in that house on the mountains or on the beach? All you have to do is sign here and all your dreams will come true. Now, they never actually said that, but that's the message that was being received by the young people. And they were saying, well, hell yeah, I want to do that. I'm just going to sign here and I'm going to be one of the rich people. And then it just never turns out that way. And suddenly they get out of school, they're hugely in debt, and then they find their first job, and it takes 6 months to find their first job. And then it's not paying nearly as much as they thought it would. And suddenly they have to contend with this debt, which they never really understood how much debt affects your lives. And so that's a big problem. Now, we have this shifting world of education where certifications right now are becoming kind of the new form of credentialing, the new game in town, if you will, that is giving a new option. So people are figuring out how to go out and get go to a coding school, or learn cybersecurity, learn Amazon Web Services, they learn cloud management, data analytics. All of these things can be learned in a shorter period of time than getting a 4-year degree. And they're giving people 6-figure incomes really early in their lives. And so a lot of young people are figuring out, well, let's go for the gold early on and try to go down that path. Some of them like it, some of them don't. It's all up to the individual. But there are new options in town. So it's not just the only game in town is to get deeply in debt to get a 4-year degree. I think there's other options.
I'm going to ask a question. Did you do that? Did you take that traditional path?
I took a messy path.
I took one too. Mine was messy. What was yours?
Oh, I was working at the time. I didn't, I've been a student all my life, but I've been doing a lot of non-traditional education. So, and at the DaVinci Institute, we put on our own events. If I want to learn about some new topic, we bring in some experts, some of the speakers, to come in and talk about that. It's a great way to pick up new insights into the world and how it's changing around us.
I'm telling you. See, I did. It took me 10 years. I had 2 at the beginning and 2 at the end of those 10 years was our school happened. And in between was company selling, was real amazing life experience, world traveling. And when I went back to school, what I found was, was that the professors and the instructors had no interest in my real life experience to be added to the conversation of what was being learned. So I had to relearn what it was like to go back and figure out, well, how do I fit in here? And do I really want to do this? And is it right for me? And so there are amazing alternative paths. And I think everybody's going to find their own. I think we're going to find more and more messy ones. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As the choices grow, the colleges are kind of pricing themselves out of the market. I mean, the price of college is just skyrocketing. And maybe you can get some scholarships, maybe it can sound cheap as you go, but then invariably just the cost of living for 4 years without an income, that's expensive. And that keeps going up too, especially in some of these pricey little college towns. So it's hard to actually get your mind wrapped around the whole package of indebtedness that you're headed towards. And so I'm not going to say that that's the wrong path for everybody, but it's certainly not right for everybody either.
There's many more paths to choose from that are right than there used to be.
Exactly. Yeah. And the types of credentialing, the types of things that we can put on our resume, that we can hang our hats on, all of those things are changing. This idea of status. So there's a lot of things that are equal college degree, or some of them are better. So if I invent something, I get a patent, that's worth the equivalent of a college degree. If it's a wildly successful invention, it could be far better. If I write a book, that might be the equivalent of a college degree. If it's a bestseller book, that might be way better. If I start a business, if I produce a game, if I produce a movie, there's all these things that we can do that are alternative paths to success that give us status in society, but they're not the methodical process laid out like a college degree. So that it's a messier path all around.
So we're going to squeeze in one small question from our Scott, since we were talking about college and the cost of college. And he's asking, how important is financial literacy? And does something like compound interest still matter today? And if it is, great. If it's not, or there's others, what else?
Yeah, financial literacy is highly important. And that's one of the things that's not being taught. I mean, virtually nobody that graduates from high school knows how to balance a checkbook. And our relationship with financial institutions, we get caught up in these little tripping points that they can assess $25, $35, $45 charge for failing to do this or failing to do that. And then it comes time to do your taxes, and then you have to go through all of those complications too. Taxes are top of the mind right now since tax day was yesterday. And it's just so messy because, you know, every transaction that we make in the United States every year is a tax point decision. Is this deductible or is this not? And we're literally making trillions of transactions. So can we really be making all those decisions in a reasonable way? Should we be automating all this? And the whole thing is so messy and so overly complicated. I think it'll collapse, but I've predicted that in the past and it hasn't happened. So we'll wait and see what happens here.
So it's interesting though, because it is important and it is messy, and it's kind of like everything else right now. In terms of, there are more choices than we've ever had before. So evaluating what our parents did or what our grandparents did or what our communities do could be very different for us because we have much more at our fingertips. Now, with that in mind, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
You are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. For additional perspectives on your growth strategy, Jess Dewell is your business advisor and consultant. Go to voiceofboldbusiness.com and click the Find Out More button to get started. Now, back to Jess.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening in today. This is program 216, The Future Now. And we're speaking with Thomas Frey, futurist and founder of the DaVinci Institute. Now, we have been all over the board, except with one thing to consider. It's all been mostly in the future. And we're there on purpose. So keep using hashtag VBB Radio, share your experiences, join in this conversation, share what you think about this as well. Because we're always, part of our decision-making process now has to be, well, how long is this going to be a reality? Because we used to make decisions like for our whole life. What do I want to be when I grow up? Well, guess what? I don't know what I want to be when I grow up because I've only done a few of the things that I wanted to be when I grow up. What about you, Thomas?
Yeah, great question. So a while back, I did a talk on the future of advice and the future of advice givers, which I thought was such a fascinating topic area. So when it comes to the future of advice, in the past, information was very scarce and only the advice givers had access to that information. Today, information is very plentiful. It's out there all over the place, but only the advice givers know what to pay attention to, or they should. And so that sounds like a subtle shift, but it's actually a really important shift in the dynamics of society. Because who do you pay attention to? Because you have so many decision points that you're going into on a daily basis. Who can you contact? Who can you ask this question? You get stressed out. Who can settle you down? Who can talk you off the ledge, so to speak, and give you sound advice?
Okay, there's so many places I want to go right now. The words are not formulating as fast as what's bumping around between my ears right now. I want to circle back a little. You mentioned being able to have certifications and do many different things. It made me think of the gig economy. And I know you're pro gig economy. Tell us more about how you're defining that and where you see the opportunity from a business perspective to take advantage and evaluate if it's good for them.
Yeah, so if you think about the way Hollywood has been working for years, whenever there's a movie project that came into play, it would attract writers and directors, camera guys, lighting guys, actors and actresses, makeup artists. All of these people would come together around this project, and then as soon as it's over, they all disperse and they very organically form around other projects. And so this is a very, very organic process that can translate into the business world. Because right now, the internet's a very sophisticated communication tool. It enables us to align the needs of a business with the talent of individuals in far more precise ways than ever before. So rather than hiring somebody full time, we bring them on for 2 months or 2 weeks or 2 days or even 2 hours, because that's all we need. That's all the help that we need. And we may pay a premium for that person that's working for 2 hours, but then we don't have all of the overhead costs associated with hiring a full-time employee. And so what's the best trade-off? I mean, we still have to maintain the institutional knowledge in our organizations. We still have to kind of know how this whole organization is operating. We still have to have those people there. But what percentage of the people can be floating in and out and just tackle the projects as turn up? That still remains to be kind of an undefined area of the business world. And we're seeing lots more experiments, and the tools we have for aligning this talent with the needs of the business are getting more specific and more precise as we go. So we're going to have more options to work with that in the future.
What does that mean for the people that are filling those roles for 2 hours in terms of the gig economy? Because I'm considering everything that you've shared and everything else that I've read of yours, and we have to be really good to get paid that premium for a business for more than one business to want to hire us to do that skill. And so there's a flip side to this concept of a gig economy when I think most people are like, ooh, I want to be part of that. I set my own hours. I set my own pricing. I only have to do the parts of the work that I like. How
Right.
real is that?
Well, first of all, nobody is teaching people how to become a freelancer.
That's
That's
true.
that's a huge omission. That's somehow that excuse me, somehow that got left out of all of our curriculums. But the gig economy is forcing this need. It's forcing the need for somebody to step up and offer some sort of a freelancer academy. And I think a freelancer academy can actually be done in maybe as little as a week. We're teaching people how to do the business of you, to view themselves as a business unit, to actually figure out how to do networking, how to meet new people, how to find new contracts, how to write a contract, how to modify it, how to negotiate a deal, how to set up your books, how to form a corporation, how to do the marketing and the sales and create your website and do the search engine optimization. All of these things, these all come into play. And how do you do all that and become good at that as an individual? Not everybody is cut out to be a freelancer. Not everybody can do that. But I think it's important that we all think of ourselves as a business unit, though, because that's highly important.
I think that's a shift. It's a new way in our current place and where our world is going. When we became really good at one thing and our expertise, it took us 30 years and 40 years and 50 years to become established and known as that for that thing, right? I'm thinking a lot of academia because that's still relevant to how they work today. And with this concept of managing you, there are pieces of discipline to go after getting what you want that are not fun. Like if you're shy, you don't probably want to network. You may not be the best negotiator if you wear your emotions on your sleeve all the time. And so what I hear you saying is people can go learn about this or read books, but actually doing it and having some place not only to practice but to understand the elements of it is so necessary because there is a discipline in being the business of you.
Absolutely. So you need to surround yourself with people who look like what you want to become. So right now in the United States, there's 1.3 million freelancers making over $100,000 a year. So how do you break into that crowd of high-paid freelancers? Well, you hang out with other high-paid freelancers. They're not easy to find. You can't just go down the street and go to a storefront and find a bunch of high-paid freelancers. They're tucked away. They don't want to be found. They're doing their thing. They've figured out their little niche and they're very good at it. But the best ones are the ones that are constantly picking up new skills, that are expanding their area of expertise, that are learning new techniques on a constant basis. And those are the ones that are the most valuable to have in your network. And creating this type of network is really, really important.
There's a question that has come in. It's from Gabby, and she is saying and asking, what is your opinion about the counterintuitive approach to the future? Should we focus on something totally opposite if we want to thrive in the new tech world?
That's actually a really good question.
Isn't that a good question?
Because what we do in the futurist world is we create these scenarios about the future. And then what I do is I try to go back in and break them. Say, okay, well, what if this doesn't happen? Or what if people are thinking different than that? So we try to break these scenarios and we try to create alternative paths. So if we start thinking about the driverless car world, one of the biggest,
one of my favorite topics.
one of the key decision points in the driverless car world is whether people will still buy their own cars or whether it's all fleet owners that are going to own that. And if it looks to me like if we own our own cars still, that somewhere along the way it starts turning into a very expensive hobby, because the fleets become so much cheaper, so much easier to interface with, and we can do it virtually anywhere in the world. We don't have to have our car at this place at that time, and so it looks to me like car ownership starts to decline. But what if it doesn't? What if we all decide, I like my car too much, I'm not going to give that up, and so that changes the whole thinking, the whole equation of how the driverless world evolves.
Okay, we're going to squeeze in one more here, and that is a question from Blake. I always wanted to know, how does one become a futurist? Is there a set of skills or interests, and how do I know if somebody's faking it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to be a futurist, you actually need a crystal ball, and so that's the first tool that you have to buy. So,
where's yours?
It's rolling around here somewhere. But,
yes. I know you have one.
There is no criteria for becoming a futurist. Anybody can. There's no certification for being a futurist. There's been several attempts in the past that's never worked. But so there's actually very few of us, though, that are actually out there making a full-time living doing it. Now, there is an association of professional futurists where they've raised the bar quite a bit, and you need a sponsor to get into that organization. But there's lots of people who love learning about the future. It becomes kind of a natural talent for them. See, one of the things that I do is when I wake up in the morning, a lot of people are thinking about what am I going to wear to work today, and I'm wondering about what people are going to wear to work 10 years from now. People are asking the question, how am I going to get to work today? I'm asking, well, how are people going to get to work 10 years from now? So my thinking tends to be time shifted into the future, and that's part of what you have to do. You have to kind of mentally take this juxtaposition and look at things through a different lens all the time. And then I have these glasses. These are red glasses, but they have a special prescription. They allow me to see into the future, and so that's my secret. So.
Oh. Oh, thanks, Blake. That was a good one. All right, now we're in the last few minutes of the show, and there's so many other things I want to ask you. I'm going to stick with this one, though. What are 3 things that you've learned thinking the way that you think that help you better think about tomorrow?
I've learned to do a better job of immersing myself in that person's situation. So I travel all over the world. Last year I was in 10 different countries, and I get to see the world through the lens of what it's like to be in Moscow, or what it's like to be in Thailand or Korea or in France or Spain. All of these are different perspectives, and especially a wealthy person is viewing the world far different than somebody who is in total poverty on the street that lives in a cardboard house. So it's really important to try to understand, what has actually caused these things to happen and how their decision making is different than mine. That is such an important piece to try to wrestle with, and it's not intuitive at all. You really have to somehow be part of those things. So the traveling is hugely important, and your personal experience, the journey you're on, you're going to understand the world far different than anybody else because they're doing something totally different. Then understanding the motivations behind things, I question. I've become much more of a skeptic on all kinds of things. just because somebody says this is the way this works, is this really how it works? Is this all of this research that was done? Is this been tainted by money coming from some lobbyist group or something that's shifting how the results are going to turn out? I'm much more skeptical about lots of reports that I run into, and then just this whole idea of exactly what's possible and what isn't. If you think about 1,000 years from now, what kind of physics is going to be possible? What type of math? What type of new technology and products? What's possible and what isn't? Is virtually anything possible? I think we're running into barriers that we don't know that are there yet. I think we're going to run into a lot of those. So we're creating new systems one after another. And one of the more interesting positions in the future is that of kind of a global system architect. Somebody that creates a new system for the entire world. Now we have cryptocurrencies that are creating kind of new currencies for the world. We have blockchain applications that are systems for the entire world. We'll probably come up with new standards for global accounting. We'll come up with new standards for airports and transportation. And if I send a package from someplace in the middle of India to San Francisco, say, how long before it can get there without ever touching any human hands? How long before we can automate that? I mean, right now, if we send information through the internet, it gets routed around and comes out over here. How long before we can put a package in over here and it gets routed around and comes out over here? These are all the crazy ideas that are floating through my head, and sometimes people like to hear about them, sometimes wear people out. So
everybody that does what they do well has people. There are people that become skeptical of them, and sometimes it's skeptical in a good way of I'm questioning the questions and can I join in and can I get there, and other times it's like this shutdown. And without focusing too much on the shutdown, I want to keep going on this concept of the possibility, because you are looking at possibility, and by talking about it, you're creating a way for companies that are out there already innovating to add themselves to the conversation and even ask different questions sparked by something that you said or something that they heard someplace else. But the point is, it's conversation and it's curiousness and it's potential and possibility. Now, with that in mind, what makes it bold? What makes it bold to recognize and be thinking about our future tomorrow, and maybe not 10 years down the road, but a few years down the road today?
Generally, we won't tackle something that's bold and outrageous unless we think that there's a reasonable chance of getting there. And it has to be over 50% probability in our own mind. And so sometimes we can do that. We can create mental images of each of the steps along the way, and we can process this in a way that we can say, oh, yeah, that is doable. And we don't have to reinvent the world, or we don't have to have some miracle that happens in some technology. We can just take this stepping stone approach and we can eventually get there. So somebody who can see, like a great chess master can see 25 moves ahead, that gives them the incentive to make these bold moves. And I find that fascinating. So that's a rare individual. I mean, that's the Mozarts, the the Beethovens, the Einsteins. Those are the ones that view the world through an entirely different lens. They're one in a billion on our planet. And if we empower these people, if we give them the right tools, we give them the right techniques, the right flow of information, then suddenly, wow, they're sitting in a seat of power and they are in command of all of these things that can change the world. I think we're right on the edge of that happening in so many different areas right now. I wrote this column on 100,000 new micro industries to be created over the next 2 decades. I actually, after thinking about that, I think that's low, because I think this emerging technology we have around us is giving us the tools of creation. It gives us the tools to create new and different things. And I think every new industry gets created as just 1 or 2 little micro businesses that spring up. Some of them will die on the vine, but other ones will explode into a whole new industry. And that, I think, is just fascinating.
You heard it here. This is Thomas Frey. He joined us on the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Now, all the program notes from today, including a link to, and I just had it up, Epiphany Z, Thomas Frey's book, latest book, will be on the show notes page at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P219. That is, no, actually, that's not right, because that's in the future. That would be voiceofboldbusiness.com/P216. And you can also search the site for Thomas Frey, or the title of the show, The Future Now. Until next time, before you walk away, you've listened, you've watched. Now, give us a thumbs up, give us a rating. We like 5-star ratings. Give us some dialogue. Use hashtag VBB Radio, because it's what you are thinking about. It's what your peers are thinking about. It's what your colleagues are thinking about. It's what our futurists like Thomas Frey are talking about and thinking about and sharing with us, that decide and shape what actions we take so that we can be the most effective leaders today. And that's going to shape our tomorrows. And our question for you is, how can you now face the future right now?